In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at all of our main models. The European model, the GFS model, the Canadian model. We're going to continue to work our way through this upcoming pattern as we see if wintertime will redeem itself or will we end winter basically on the same note we started it on with nothing happening all the way through February and March. I'm very curious to see if things can turn around and even get us a little bit satisfied with the snowfall and the cold air because thus far it has been probably one of the most snowless winters historically in the eastern United States. There's a couple I think that ended up like this one. Just some to jump off the screen at me when I'm looking at them is 2007 to 2008. I think 2011 to 2012 was similar, and then even 2019 to 2020 I can remember it being extremely snowless. But this winter has been up there with those winters so far, unless things again turn around in a major way. And even just looking at the model here, we're going to just dive into a lot of this activity. We have a cold front here, warm front here, a bit of a low hanging out, and this is going to create some opportunity for severe weather underneath as we have this warm sector here. The cold air is sort of diving in behind, but as I'm drawing these features, they seem very intense, but let me tell you, this is a bit of a weaker system than we've been dealing with for the most part. And we see this move in and we get kind of just this mess underneath. And typically, this doesn't usually lead towards very, very big severe weather outbreaks just because it's all over the place. And this convective available potential energy, CAPE as we call it, is a huge player in severe weather events. And when you have this showery activity out ahead, it starts to limit how much cape can develop, and it even eats up some of the cape that's already there. In certain instances, the most we're gonna play pretend here for a minute, okay? The most terrible severe weather events would be more extreme. We would have a cold front here, warm front here, just like we see. And then what would happen is it would be probably more like April or May when we could get into the 70s and 80s out ahead and be sunny and very humid. So you'd be watching for these areas where we're pretty much clear. There's no precipitation in here. You would watch for it to continue being sunny, and continue to build in humidity and temperature, and then you would have a much stronger cold front than this, a much stronger low, and probably even a much stronger warm front signal here. And then this area you would watch and see if no precipitation develops in your sector that you're watching for severe weather, that basically means it has the highest potential possible for the parameters in place. But oftentimes what we see in severe weather events is showers and cloudiness start to develop, and this eats up that potential because again, it prohibits a lot of CAPE from developing in the first place, and whatever CAPE is there, it eats up some of it. So that really drastically lowers potential. And oftentimes, that is something we see happen. We do see that happen with these areas that would potentially be looking at some severe weather. But again, we're not talking about a terrible, terrible, terrible severe weather day as it is anyway. But that does eat up some of the potential that's already kind of there. Now, for the 30th, here we do have some precipitation in this area. The jet stream is all over the place here. We do have some snowfall developing right around that jet stream there for the Ohio Valley into the northeast. That is mostly going to be lighter snowfall showers. And we're seeing a trend here with just a lot of the lighter snowfall. And we do see this ice storm developing here for Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, like we mentioned. Definitely something we've been watching for a while now. And we see this continuous pattern of these storms moving through the southeast region. Finally, we get a very favorable jet stream here, but it really just so happens that all of this precipitation stays just south of where it can even be in the form of snowfall. So not enough of that precipitation field gets northward enough for snowfall to occur. We actually see this jet stream dive pretty darn far south in the east. This looks very cold here, right around February 4th. I just want to quickly take a look at what those temperatures would actually look like here. Um, we do have to move back to the 0Z model run here. So right around the 4th, yeah, so we would be seeing quite intense temperatures. This is looking like 20s and even teens for a lot of these red areas in here. And then you're looking at below 0 degrees in these kind of turquoise areas up here. So this is all below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And here is going to be your single digits just below that in these kind of purplish areas. And then everything below that in the reds is again your teens and 20s. So we're going to be seeing pretty significant cold air. I would say when comparing this, it's not quite as cold as that air that we had um, on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but this is definitely going to be the second coldest air that we've seen all winter long here right on February 4th. But again, conveniently, there is no precipitation anywhere to be found the second the cold air moves in. So that has been a common occurrence as well this winter. When the cold air moves in, the precipitation suddenly moves away. When the warm air moves in, precipitation is everywhere basically. So the matchup has just been really awful, to say the least. We do see another trough moving in to the east, potentially right around maybe the end of the first week of February there, and we see this cold air diving this way. Since featuring some precipitation along that jet stream, this is obviously pretty far out, so we're going to continue to take this with a grain of salt. But regardless, we're definitely seeing some more potential cold air already for February than we saw all of January. I will say that. Now, as we move into the total precipitation, there's no surprise whatsoever that we have a lot of this coming in through the southeast. We've talked about this for a while, how there's just going to be a train of precipitation moving through this area. Some of it coming all the way from the Pacific, actually. And then some of it is coming from the Gulf of Mexico from certain points. We could see a lot of that energy entering in. And this leads towards a large amount of precipitation in this area over the next 10 days, mostly 2 to 5 inches of precipitation in here, which is a lot for a single 10-day period in the wintertime. So, certainly a large amount of precipitation expected in there, and also here along the northwest. But actually, this is a decreased amount from what we've seen most of the winter for the west. So, definitely things are intensifying in the southeast as far as rainfall is concerned. And then we're seeing things kind of decreasing in intensity here out west for the most part, even though there's still quite a bit of activity expected. Now, total snowfall through the next 10 days, it certainly appears like the west is getting the majority here of this snow. Maybe surrounding the Great Lakes as well. We could see some snowfall in the United States. But basically, most areas in the central and the eastern United States here are still featuring pretty much no snowfall. Maybe an inch or two in here in a couple of spots. And actually, in the east, I think most of the snowfall here is happening over the ocean. Some ocean effect snowfall happening here as the cold winds move off the coast. We see this move over basically the Gulf Stream. And so we got warmer waters offshore of the east out here. And as that cold air moves directly off and up like this creates heavy snowfall for some spots out here. So some boats and some fish might see some snowfall, but no land seeing any of this whatsoever. Now, the GFS model, I would just want to roll through with this. We do get a little bit of a longer range look here. We do get a bit more snowfall here on the northern extent of things, right around the 31st. So this model has been consistent with showing this. But something I want to note here is that you don't want to be basically relying on only the GFS model. If the GFS model is the only model calling for something, that is a bit of a red flag, in my opinion, typically. So we are watching for this, and still it's kind of holding on to its guns that there will be pretty much minimal freezing rain occurring in here. And the European model and the Canadian model still show a very large amount of that freezing rain taking place. We even see more Virginia and Mid-Atlantic snowfall here for around the 2nd of February there. Um, and it almost wants to produce something in this area again right around the 4th. What we'll see is this energy kind of all moves off the southeast, but then it kind of just sits there, and then it wants to move like almost directly up the coast. And we have seen this stalling out before, and then kind of that energy moving up. So again, it's moving, 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 and then it just freezes in place, and then it moves right up the coast. And this could pose a threat for the East Coast if something like this was to occur, but it's the same thing. Why would we be relying only on the GFS model for what it's showing when we have better models that have a better track record basically not showing it? It doesn't mean to completely discard it as a possibility. It just means to not look at it as a likelihood. I hope you can decipher the difference of that because this GFS model's track record, again, is not there with the European model or even the Canadian model anymore. But occasionally it will be onto something and the other models aren't seeing it. So that's why we still show it, even though, because I get a lot of people, oh, if the GFS model's so bad, why do we even show it? Because one time out of 10, it's right and the other models are wrong. So we have to basically consider what it's saying. And it's kind of annoying that that's how it works. It'd almost be easier if it was just wrong 100% of the time, because then I could literally just ignore it. But it's just good enough to where it cannot be ignored and it has to be considered what it's showing. The European model is going to be right, more times than not. So we get a significantly more accurate look from the European model compared to the GFS model. But problem is that again, there is sometimes where the European model is just off with what it's showing, and sometimes the GFS model is filling in the gap there, and that model's correct. Other times, as you might guess, there's no models that are correct about what's going to happen, and that's kind of some of our tougher cases, and that's always needs to be considered as well. So literally anything is possible. We just have these models to use as guidance. That's what it should be taken as, at least not a forecast, but guidance as to what may occur, and then we use our kind of tolerance to decide, and it's really up to you which one you believe and how much you want to believe it. But again, these models are just good enough to be considered, especially the European model, the Canadian model, which have gotten better progressively through the years. GFS model getting kind of progressively worse, actually. We do get a bit of a snow system on the GFS model right around the 10th, which no models go out that far other than the GFS. So definitely something to note, but could be gone the next model run. And then it looks like we want to return kind of to this southeast ridge. And I think what's interesting about this particular frame here is it does seem like there is a bit of a low. Maybe even it's around here. We have a pretty significant warm front taking place in here, so we see a pretty strong warm sector right on this frame, right around the 14th, and then we have this really, really intense cold front underneath. Even snowfall reaching as far south as New Mexico, right behind Texas there. And this would be an excellent severe weather setup. Very, very unfortunate, but definitely looks intense here. And this is exactly what I was talking about with those much higher likelihood severe weather events. This looks a lot more conductive for an event like that than what we are seeing in the next 10 days. Certainly something to watch if you're anywhere here in kind of the south central United States, even I guess the southeast as things continue to progress. But this is extremely far out, and for all I know, this could be gone the next model run. But seeing a signal like this is a little bit concerning, regardless of when you're seeing it. But the likelihood of this actually just being accurate is again next to nothing, but it is slightly possible, and that's the actual problem. Now the Canadian model, let's just roll through it again. This model has been actually better than the GFS model this year, which usually this model is slightly worse. But this model has actually stepped up a little bit and has become almost as good as the European model. It's actually right behind the European model in accuracy, and then the GFS model is far behind both. We do see the freezing rain, uh, the sleet, and even the snow here on this model, so we're getting all three, a trifecta of precipitation types here, even four if you also note the rain there. So we're getting all sorts of messy precipitation there for the south central United States, and this even extends into Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. There was a bit of snowfall for February 1st. Again, this is 84 hours out, and we have a lot of disagreement on the models. Some freezing rain still taking place here for Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee. Certainly a possibility. And then we see this kind of just continue on the northern extent of this precipitation coming in from the Gulf. So this could be extremely problematic, if you ask me. And then we see that cold air move in, a little less significant here on this Canadian model. And then we get a bit of a winter storm here around the 6th on this Canadian model, right here for southern New England through the mid Atlantic, even for portions of the Appalachian Mountains and Smoky Mountains there. Um, very, very messy storm there we see on the model. And then we basically end things with a um, pretty just quiet look, I would say. There's nothing really major happening here. I do want to take a look real quickly at the total freezing rain on each of these models because this looked like a lot to me. Yeah, I was about to say that looked like a significant amount of ice, and I want to take a look at our GFS model too because this is going to be really interesting to see how much less we see here. We do see a lot spread across the nation, but really a lot less happening here. And then as we take a look at um, our European model here, we see there is a pretty significant amount, but less overall. Yes, we see close to an inch. All of these areas seeing a pretty significant ice storm, close to an inch here, kind of in your north central Texas region into southern Oklahoma there, and then we get pretty much half an inch around portions of Arkansas and Tennessee. So to see that, and then to see the GFS model, which we'll switch to that same view, um, to see the GFS model showing basically nothing in these areas. I guess there is a quarter of an inch near Arkansas and Tennessee. We see some up here at some point during the model run, also some through the Ohio Valley. So we get these interesting little ice storms in here. Then this Canadian model is definitely the most concerning, though, because we see over an inch right around Dallas Fort Worth area there, as you can see, maybe even an inch and a half to basically 2 inches. I think we're somewhere between an inch and a half to 2 inches in there in that dark shade right over Dallas Fort Worth. Or I think that might be south of Dallas Fort Worth. You guys would have to correct me. There is no interstates or counties on this, obviously, so it's pretty hard to see. But I think that that is very close. We see that southern Arkansas here is well over 2 inches. So this would just be catastrophic level ice storm. Anything over an inch is where you start to reach that like really, really bad level. So seeing over 2 inches is just extremely significant. I'm almost obviously at a loss for words here. So I hope to see this trend in a much lighter direction here because this is pretty significant. Really would be probably a historic freezing rain event if we saw these levels of accumulation there. So certainly hoping that that is not the case. Now, tune in with us daily. We will be going over this every single day. All this ice storm event. We're going to be going over potential snowfall, cold air, everything. And every single day, we do get one day further into the outlook on our European model and Canadian model. So more and more gets revealed on the back end of things every single day. So yes, be sure to subscribe as we will be uploading daily. Like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.